pipeline safety lead engineer for the division.
No, it's not.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Are there people
Who's
listening in,
no?
anybody's in the stream or anything?
Well, the stream, I'm not sure yet.
Should we introduce the people in the room? How's that?
Absolutely.
Often we start that way.
Okay, so I did myself, Al Zadeh, maybe we go around.
Sure, I'm Logan Bollinger. I'm a pipeline safety engineer. Been here about 6 years.
Jimmy Beetham, pipeline safety engineer, been here about 19, 20 years.
And Dave Clark with the commission.
John Harvey, commission, been here forever.
Let's go around this way.
Jennifer Clark, counsel for Enbridge Gas, Utah.
Austin Summers in Rates and Regulation for Enbridge.
Jeff Hansen, Director of Pipeline Safety with Enbridge Gas.
I'm Nathan Schmidt. I just started as a pipeline safety engineer about 5 months ago.
We would let you sit at the table even though you're new.
I'm honored.
Denied. John Delaney with the Commission.
Tricia Schmid, AG's office, representing the Division of Public Utilities and Utah Pipeline Safety Section.
Gary Witterberg with the commission.
And Connie Hendricks with Utah Pipeline Safety.
So in Utah, the commission, Public Service Commission, is the authority for regulated pipelines and have adopted the relevant parts of the federal pipeline safety regulations. Chapter 13 of the Utah Code Title 54 spells out this authority, and Chapter 8A of the same code covers excavation damage prevention and excavation enforcement, which is under AG's jurisdiction. Tricia Schmidt leading these efforts. PHMSA is the acronym for Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration. It is part of the Federal Department of Transportation, responsible for regulating pipelines in the country. It operates a training and qualification center where all the state and federal inspectors are qualified. It also provides funding assistance to state programs under a certification process. This certificate is only for a year and must be renewed every year. The renewal process requires us to submit progress reports and go through audits of our policy procedures plan and records every year. Our certification is only for gas pipelines in Utah. Liquid pipelines are under PHMSA jurisdiction in Utah. On the average, 60% of our funding comes from this grant money. We try meeting the performance requirements and keep our certificate in good standing. This chart represents the actual cost and amounts of the federal funding. The line chart is the percentage of the federal funding, which covers, as I said, 60%, averages 60% over the 15 years included in the chart.
Al, just a question about that last chart. So looking at the last 3 years, actual costs going up, PHMSA funding coming down, or federal funding rather, coming down. And is there any single explanation for that, or is it a fruit
Obviously,
salad of?
the cost of operation for us doesn't really changes. Whatever the PHMSA doesn't make up comes from the state. And PHMSA gets allocated monies for, its state programs. And based on, I'm going to talk about the scoring, they evaluate the pipelines, programs throughout the states, and basically divide whatever pot of money they have between the states based on their scoring system.
So is the reduction due to lowered funding that PHMSA's allocating among the states, or lower scoring that our state is receiving from PHMSA?
We've been actually, that's a good question. I'm interesting that you bring that up because I didn't notice that. According to what I know, the PHMSA funding has been going up, especially in the last year or two. So maybe it's my math that is failing me, that it's showing that. And so, but we'll look into that, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
But it's not based on poor performance, because we get
This-
100%
yeah.
of that.
These numbers, the cost numbers obviously comes from our downstairs, second floor administration of the Commerce that controls all that. And the federal funds come from the final amounts that they basically send us and basically notify us that we've got these amounts. So,
Is some
Yeah.
of the federal funding a need based, so states that have bigger problems get funding, or?
it's actually the size of the problem, size of the programs. For example, California and Texas, I mean, they have huge programs over near 40 inspectors and so forth. They get proportionately a lot more money. But the scoring the difference in the scoring is very little, so much so that it shouldn't hinder really the,
Well, yeah, I saw that slide, that you're basically hundreds on every one for years and years and years. So I was just trying to figure out what it might be to be sending that down. I was just wondering if they allocated part of their budget to where they perceived big problems or something, and that was taken away, but we will let you.
I don't know, I mean, I just get all those amounts through whatever emails come through feds and so forth.
Yep.
I have no control over any of that anyways. Okay. PHMSA uses a scoring system for evaluating our program. Both the progress report and the audit PHMSA performs every year are scored. Combination of these two scores makes up our funding score or performance score. Our program has met 100% of the requirements in the last 5 years, except in 2020 that there was a loss of 3 points. So again, this is why I couldn't explain why the lines were going
Yeah.
down. We're reading the requirements.
Well,
and,
congratulations on the perfect scores.
Well,
Hey, Al, quick question on audits. If you have an exception, do they allow you to provide a response or how does that work, the back and forth with the?
So like, are you asking if they have a draft audit report that he reviews before the final audit goes in?
Correct.
It's more discussion, right? Verbal, would you say that?
the scheduling of it or
No,
exception?
like as a post-inspection, you mean? When PHMSA is ready to give us the results, you guys have a conversation first, basically?
Well, actually, it's very much prescribed. There's a big book of state guidelines for qualifying for certification and how the state programs should be operating. For example, coming back to those 3 points, 2020 PHMSA came out with this idea that there is a lot of replacement and 20% of the inspection should be construction. We're a small group. If we wanted all of a sudden to increase our construction inspections, we had to kind of let go of some of the other inspections that we do. So we fell short of maybe 4 or 5 days in that 20%.
And it was COVID that year too,
Yeah.
so that was a weird.
And so, again, in that the state guideline, it prescribes if you fall short of, say, 3 days or so many percentages, you lose 3 points. So many more percentages, you lose 5 points and so forth. And that 3 point is for that.
Well,
So it's
score-
very much prescribed. There
Scores
is no-
prescribed are based on a
Yeah.
formula,
So,
so to speak.
well, they kind of stick to their scoring because there's 50 states basically going for more money. So, all right. So I'm not sure if I answered your question there or not, but. Okay.
It's not like a traditional audit.
So yearly progress reports are due March of every year and cover the following parts. Part 1, percentage of operators and inspection units inspected for different types of operators. 2, the amount of time spent on different types of inspections. 3, updated list of all the regulated operators in a state. 4, accident investigation data. 5, compliance stats are the number of non-compliances discovered and corrected or not during the year. 6 different types of documentation kept for the operation of our program, 7 training qualification of our inspectors. 8 is the adoption status, is when the state has adopted or planning to adopt federal regulations. 9 left blank on purpose. 10, this part does not get scored and covers general questions about our long-term goals for our program and achievements for the year, and also includes questions about the state's damage prevention plans, whether it meets the 9 requirements or not. These elements are included in the Chapter 8A of the Utah Code Title 54 and meets the requirement, and the state's damage prevention plan has been deemed adequate by PHMSA. As part of PHMSA annual audit of our program, PHMSA auditors come out in person to inspect our program. This field audit includes the following parts. Part A, going through our records and verifying the accuracy of the information included in the progress report. B, inspection procedures are part of our policy procedure plan. Much like operators that are required to have operation maintenance plans explaining how they operate their pipelines. We have a policy procedure plan that explains how our program operates. For example, what are procedures for conducting different types of inspections, processing of the results, tracking non-compliances, and so forth. This plan gets updated every year and audited by PHMSA. Part C, inspectors get their qualification by completing the required training courses at the PHMSA TNQ. The qualifications of inspectors are included in the progress report and records of training verified during the audit. D, program performance is the accounting of all the inspections and their results for the year. E, field inspection part is where auditors go out and observe our inspectors while they conduct inspections for verifying their competence. F, damage prevention, whether we meet the 9 elements and how we collect damage reports and analyze those data.
And the last inspection from PHMSA was when?
April 2024.
April 2024.
And how long do they spend with you?
It's usually 1 to 5 days, 1 day is travel, and it's 3.5 days or so for going through our records, audits, and us scheduling.
How big of a team do they bring?
Usually 1, sometimes
1
2.
person? Okay, thank you.
This is a list of all the regulated operators in the state. 1 local distribution operator that provides more than 99.5% of our services. 6 intrastate transmission operators. 5 municipal distribution operators. 1 LPG. 16 gas gathering. And 48 master meters. Master meters are small systems that receive gas through a large meter from a bigger distribution company. Master meter operators are responsible to the piping downstream of their meter that distributes and resells to their tenants in a limited area, like an apartment complex or a mobile home park.
Are most of them mobile home parks?
A mix of condominiums, apartments, and
Okay.
mobile parks.
Thanks.
We have total of 77 regulated operators in our state.
Is the master meter number gone down at all, or is it pretty stable? I know we have tariffs that say we can't get new ones. unless
It's
there's-
been fairly stable, I say. We help them and try to convince them that by modifying their system, they drop out of regulation. And we have 1 or 2 of those over the last 3-4 years. Then I think there was 1 occasion that we gained 1 master meter that,
We've gained 2 this year, and lost 1, so
so.
we thought we were going down, but,
What was the situation, the ones we gained?
during an incident, we discovered that they were master meter.
Oh, they
Possible.
were just doing that, but hadn't,
Yeah, basically there was an incident, we discovered
Yeah.
that their configuration is such that they should be regulated.
Interesting.
So they weren't a new customer
Nope.
that got it?
They
It was-
existed and hadn't, yeah.
And we
Reported.
weren't aware of them.
You guys weren't
Connie got on it though.
I got on that, looking and I got on that.
All right.
So these are the inventory of different types of regulated pipelines in our state. Operators are required to report the pipeline mileages in their annual reports every year. These numbers are total mileages from all our regulated operators in our state. 804 miles of transmission pipelines, which 173 miles are located within high consequence areas. HCA's are high population densities, thereby high consequence areas where higher levels of maintenance are required. Over 20,000 miles of distribution pipelines. Distribution pipelines are called IHP, intermediate high pressure, operating at much lower pressures than transmission pipelines. The MAOP, maximum allowed operating pressure of a distribution lines, are 60 pounds, where the MAOP of transmission lines are much higher, up to 800 pounds in our state. Some of the interstate pipelines, interstate transmission pipelines like Kern River, operates at even higher pressures. Total number of gas services is slightly over 1,019,000, which only 5,219 of them are provided by municipal systems. Gas gathering pipelines are ranked and regulated based on their level of risk from A to R. Type A being the highest risk and most regulated, to R, lowest risk and least regulated. We have 13 miles of type A, 4 miles of B, 945 miles of C, and a slightly over 5,000 miles of type R. Type R pipelines are small diameter, low pressure pipelines in mostly rural areas that transport unrefined products pulled out of the ground to where it is pressurized and put into type C or B or A to be transported to a processing plant. We have a few more slides explaining gas gathering regulation and pipeline types in more detail later in this presentation. As part of the distribution annual report, operators are required to report their damage numbers. These are the total of all regulated operators in Utah. During 2023, they were over 590,000 locate tickets called into both states of Utah. There were a total of 1,383 damages. Damages per thousand is a metrics used, and our damages per thousand were 2.34, and this is the metrics that the industry and PHMSA uses.
Are all damages dig-ins?
Pretty much, yeah, I would say, right, Jimmy?
Dig-ins, and then there are varied subcategories under that, in that portion.
So out of a total of 1,383 damage, 44% was caused by excavator error. 405 was caused by dig-in without ticket, and 362, 26% was caused by operator error. Others that do not fit in the above categories are placed in the other, which is very small amount. This chart represents number of damages per thousand tickets. Our damages per thousand in 2023 was 2.34. This is a slight uptick from last year, but the overall trend is downward. It is hard to use damages per thousand numbers for comparing different states. The damage prevention regulations are different for each state, especially for the length of time that a locate ticket is valid. that influence the total number of ticket per state and skews the damages per thousand number. One other metrics that PHMSA has been using for the last few years for comparing performance of different states is damages per 10,000 customers or 10,000 services. This metrics bring in the number of services to analyses, which directly correlate to the number of people living and working above pipelines, and compares all 50 states and ranks their standing. This slide shows the states included in the PHMSA's western region, where Utah is ranked second highest number of damages. In 2023, Utah's ranking was 34 nationally among 50 states.
Is Idaho the top or California? I'm assuming Idaho.
Idaho by 40s. The left side, the vertical axis is the number of the ranking number, basically.
They were just trying to figure out the two colors, which was the orange and which was the barely off orange.
They're pretty close, but
Oh, yeah.
Idaho up top is.
Idaho up top.
yeah, that's what I
I'm
figured.
intrigued that there's kind of the three groups, particularly when you get to these later years.
Idaho just have a bunch of rogue operators, or, I mean, what's going on there?
Well,
I
Idaho
don't
and
even
us.
Such a
Where?
small number of services, honestly, it's just the.
Just the
tiny,
limitation
smaller
of-
number of total, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They actually have the same number of inspector as we do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Jimmy is our lead inspector and has been with the program for nearly 20 years and is going to cover how we conduct inspections and results.
Thank you, Al. Thanks for that introduction. My name is Jimmy Beetham. Just going to cover some of our process. We conduct our inspections with our operators. So here is our typical inspection cycle that we have on what we do year after year. Every year we do a standard inspection. That includes reviewing procedures and records of the operators' processes and their program. We also review operation and maintenance plans. These are done on a 3-year cycle, along with emergency plans and also with their LNGs, which stands for liquid natural gas. A lot of these plans are reviewing what the operators would do in situations. For example, an emergency situation, how they would respond to an incident, how they respond and correct if somebody damaged a pipeline, and how they would remediate that and return it back to normal service. These are the things that we would look at. In addition to the 3-year cycle, we have 5-year cycle inspections that include more detailed plans, such as anti-drug and alcohol plans. These are plans to be able to see how the operator tests their employees if they contributed to an incident, to see if drug or alcohol was part of that, and also doing normal alcohol and drug testing throughout the year. In addition to that, we have public awareness plans, which are educational provisions that are distributed to stakeholder audience, such as the public, emergency responders, emergency officials, and also the excavators. So these are how well the message is getting across to the stakeholder audience and how well they are being received. And then we look at those plans. In addition to that, also, we have the operator qualification plan, which we call OQ. This is to determine how well the operator is training their employees to do covered tasks in the system, such as testing their knowledge, their ability, their skill, making sure that they're fully qualified before they can get out and perform some of these covered tasks on the pipeline system. One of the bigger programs we also look at is integrity management programs. They have a component which is on the transmission side, which they call TIM. They also have one for distribution as well. And this is integrity. What it is, it's the operator looks at what they have in their system and tries to come up with threats that are detrimental to the operation of their pipelines and how they can mitigate those threats and try to reduce them with preventative and mitigated measures and try to return it back to service or reduce that threat to a lower consequence and risk values and probability. So this integrity management, we do spend some time with that with the operator because it's a very big program to look at and review year after year. And it, along with that, we also look at methane emissions, which is methane that escapes from any pipeline that it comes above ground, whenever you're turning valve or whenever you're blowing down a line. This program requires us to look at how well this emission is being contained or being controlled so that it doesn't contribute to greenhouse gases or release of gases in the atmosphere. Big programs, again, with the control room management plan. This is where they have a control room. I think they have a big screens where they manage where all the gas is being distributed, where it's going, and they can control valves, or where they see abnormal conditions that are occurring, they can shut it down directly from the control room. So we look at how that is managed and how well their employees are managing schedules so that these are managed on a 24/7 basis. We look at master meters. We have every year we have a percentage to cover 100% of all of our master meters in Utah, and we try to make sure we meet that demand from what was it, 13% that we cover?
We cover 20%
20%
every year
every
to
year.
meet 100% in 5.
Yeah, to cover 48 of all those master meters.
Yeah.
Because we just can't cover them all in 1 year, so we try to space it out so it's more efficient for us to do it that way. And PHMSA has approved that process to do it within 5 years.
So for Enbridge, where they now have an LNG plant, do they get 2 inspections?
Yes, so these are breaking out in unit inspections. So when we look at transmission, we specifically set aside a week or 2 for transmission assets, all of their feeder line pipelines. For their distribution, we break it up because it's so huge. We break it up into 10 to 12 weeks to look at different regions of their system. And LNG has its standalone unit inspection for that because it's a standalone and we put it on a 3-year cycle, yeah. There's not much change after the initial commissioning of that project, which was about a 3-year project, and it was very informative while we were on that project. Next, this is just diving a little bit more into the records and procedures. So all of our operators, we do the same inspection for records, and some of the records include, I'll just read off the list here. Some of it is leak surveys, pipeline patrols, corrosion control programs, keeping the pipe from corroding, orderization, making sure they're putting in mercaptan in certain places where it needs to go as part of the distribution system. Valves, controlling valves that restrict or isolate certain sections of the system when somebody digs into a line or there's something going on with the pipeline. MAOP, which is maximum allowable operating pressures, how well they're determining each pipe that meets certain MAOPs. Regulator stations that control the pressures in the distribution system. The relief valves or relief devices, vaults. Again, I mentioned TIMP program and the DIM program. That is transmission and distribution integrity management programs. We also look at the inline inspection tools, which is called ILI. That's basically running magnetic pigs in the pipeline, picking up any anomalies that they would find and that they would have to correct once the results come back, and then they go and do observation digs, or they go and find out why is the pipe corroding in this section of the area. Question? Sorry. Okay. We also review SRCs with safety-related conditions, which are submitted from the operator to our office. We review these. These are like any abnormal changes in pressure that's to the pipeline, so they have to submit those reports so that we can investigate and find out what's going on. OQ is operator qualification. We look at the qualification records of the employees of the operator who do work around the pipeline. PAPE is Public Awareness Effectiveness Review. We're just trying to see how the message is getting out and how the message is being received to the public, to all the different stakeholder audience. So we make sure we review all of those records. Construction, we try to meet our 20% demand for that. So there's a certain amount of days we have to get construction inspections in, and we're doing a pretty good job so far meeting that. We are on an on-call basis, so we rotate a schedule for being on call to respond to any incidents on a 24/7 basis. We monitor, our office receives complaints from the public, but also ordering complaints and farm taps. These are farm taps that are tapped right off of a transmission line directly into a home. We don't have that very often, but they're in our system.
That can get interesting.
Exactly. Anything that's all applicable. So there's a lot of things that we do out in the field with records and procedures, and to keep everything organized, everything in how we do these inspections, we use a PHMSA software called IA, which is Inspection Assistant, to help us manage and find out what we've done. And this is part of our progress report. So when the PHMSA operator comes and looks at our program, they go to our software and they look at what we've done to different operators, inspecting different records and procedures.
You told us about that in a fair bit of detail last year, I think.
Yeah, that's the one I demonstrated. That's the software we use. Finally, at the end of records and procedures inspection, we do a field inspection. And these are where we're putting the boots on the ground. We're doing on-site visits. We're trying to confirm the operator's culture on how they execute their procedure with what they're doing on the field. We use the records as a caveat to find out certain areas in their system to go and look at. So that provides us an indicator of what the operator has, and we use the field inspections to verify and validate what they're doing on paper is what they're doing out on the field. These are inspections that are not limited to, again, regulator station, odorizers, commercial and industrial meters and regulators, relief devices, what I mentioned before, transmission pipes, valves, rectifiers, cathodic protection, you guys know all that, so, and compressor stations.
How often are inspectors in the field with Enbridge?
So that's a good
Facilities.
question. So we set aside, they're the biggest operators, so we set aside about 15 to 18 weeks. Because we break up all of their regions and we set aside a week per region.
Would those be running back to back in the same?
No, they're
or
throughout
they
the year.
Sprinkled?
They're
Okay.
sprinkled in, and it's availability. Most of the time it's done between spring and end of summer.
Yes.
Because then it
Access.
runs into fall where they need their field folks to manage the system for the winter. So we can only do it when there's an open of opportunity, and that's between spring and summer.
Mm.
It's where we can utilize their field people operations, right, Jeff? Their operations folks. So they have different groups where they're available at certain times of the year, so we have to coordinate our time with them during their openings.
You anticipated the next slide.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So we can do this one quick.
So the LEC again, we've broken up into different units, and each unit takes about 6 days. We look at the records for that region, and then we do the 5 days we do in the field looking at what we looked at on their records, which is a lot. And our local distribution company has a lot of inventory and assets, so we try to space them out and do randomly selected sites based off of how many inspectors we have. We have 3 inspectors total that do field inspections, so we have to be very judicious in how we place those inspection units. For municipalities and gathering operators and intra-transmission operators, usually it'll take about 1 inspection unit. That's about 3 to 5 days that we set aside for their inspections. For our smaller master meter, it takes about half a day to a day because they're a smaller system. We can walk around, talk to the operator, and have an exit interview after we do the inspection.
Looking back at the inspection intervals, so are these kind of physical inspections happening every year?
That's correct, yes. Every year, because we're looking at different regions. Each region, let's say, for example, Salt Lake, the metropolitan area, we will focus on like West Valley area, we'll focus on the avenues, we'll focus on, and then we'll rotate that every year. So we're not looking at the same thing year after year, but we try to look at it collectively, the whole system.
So the whole system would be every 5 years?
Pretty much, yes.
But,
5 to 3.
yeah, got you. Okay, thanks.
Because Utah is a big state, and there's lots of inventory of assets to look at, and so we try to have our eyes see almost everything. We try to strive for that, but again, we're doing our best we can.
And we try to spread our inspection so that we cover the whole of the system. But as far as visiting every facility, every reg station, every valve, we don't do that we don't get to it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Exactly, yeah, thank you. Exactly.
You're doing enough to sort of monitor in a sampling. I don't know if it's a statistical sampling, but you're getting a sampling in each area so that you have a sense of
Kind of
what's.
get in a sense, not so much actually even statistically, I wouldn't even say statistically representative. Because our inspections are very limited as far as total assets that we have, not just the Enbridge, throughout all the operators in our state. But the little ones, obviously, it's easier to cover more of their facilities as opposed to Enbridge.
But on Enbridge, you're doing 10 a year? Is that what this slide is saying, is you're doing 10 specific inspections a year on Enbridge?
We do visit those. By the way, all our operators, regulated operators are one inspection units except for Enbridge, which is 10.
Okay, so but that's the
We
annual.
do visit every, 10 of those with our standard inspections every year.
Got
And the other specialized inspections 3 and 5 years.
Yeah,
That
yeah, got it, okay.
Which makes sense, given the size.
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes sense.
Well, they extend from northern state line to southern and to eastern and provide more than 99.5% of our services.
Next on our length of inspection is our construction inspection. So in the state of Utah, we do receive a UCN, which is a Utah Construction Notice from the operator. And from those UCNs, we determine how many times we need to get out to those projects that the operator provides information on. So it could vary from 1 day to multiple days depending on how long the project is. The recent project from Logan down to Bountiful, that was feeder line 127. Those took multiple days because they had it going for almost a year and a half with that project. Typical projects that take normal day is like an IHP project when they're doing a subdivision
Time service.
or time services or anything like that. That doesn't take very long. It's just a 1 day construction project. So we like to get on those every once in a while and sprinkle it in with our bigger construction inspection with the feeder lines. One of the other length that we don't know very well is the incident investigations. That can vary within a day or multiple days, depending how big the incident is.
How many incidents a year?
Good question, and that goes to our next slide. We'll go to the incident section. So with this incident, in 2023, we had 12, and in 2024, we had 22. We don't know why the incidents went up, but these are what we call state reportable incidents that the operator that the operator dispatch to our office when whoever's on call will respond to that, and that's our number for our incidents that we went out and investigated that met a threshold for state reportable incident. So this is not what total incidents that an operator would have. This is just what was reported to us that met the state reporting criteria and that we went out and investigated it.
What's the threshold?
Good question. The threshold is in the 409 on the state ruling, the state reportable incident. And it's about five of them. I'll read just anything damaged to 12 inches or greater, result in property damage of 15,000 or more. Let's see, results in loss of gas service to 10 or more customers, results in an non-evacuation of any highly populated areas, including commercial businesses, office, schools, eateries, and so forth. So those are the 5 main state reportable incident criteria. Okay, going back to our other numbers, after we conduct our records, procedures, and our field inspections, we tally the number of inspections, but we also have results of NOPVs, letters that we issue out. These are notice of probable violations. These are some things that we find that are not in compliance with the 192 code or the CFR, which is Code of Federal Regulations, that didn't meet that or could use some more work. These are items that we address to the operator as part of our exit interview, and we send it in a letter form so that we know that what we found was documented. And then we have the numbers of violations found, because one violation could be several or have different pieces of evidence in them. And so we tally them out, those numbers, and then we have it corrected from when the operator replies back to us. So we have a certain time that we have to send a letter to them, 30 days, then they have 30 days to comply or correct the issues, and then we send back a closeout letter saying that we find out your corrections are merited and it meets the code, and then we close our inspection with no further action. So you can see the numbers are corrected. If we don't correct that issue, then it gets carried over to the next year. So we try to stick with the operator to make sure that those items are corrected and are not left stagnant or left uncorrected. And then we also list our construction inspection days. You can see the number was higher in 2023. That's due to the fact that we were closing our LNG construction project, which provided a lot of time and a lot of on-site inspection, so that's why our number was higher in 2023 than it was in 2024.
So how do you get higher numbers for the number of violations and probable from the previous year than the letters issued?
Oh, for 108 to 84?
Well, no, so if I'm looking at the second line, the number of probable violation letters, and it's only 30 and 21, but then I say probable violations from the previous year, and it's 61 and 94.
You can have multiple violations
Yeah,
in one letter.
in one letter.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Exactly.
got it.
So if the other 30 letters, like maybe one letter might have 5 violations,
Okay.
or might have had 2
Yeah.
violations or 1.
Okay.
Be multiples of that.
All right.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Logan Wallinger, who's been with Utah Pipeline Safety for 6 years. Comes with a lot of experience in the oil fields, so I'll let him take it over.
Thank you, Jackson. Well, my name is Logan. I'm going to jump into some of these gas gathering pipelines we had kind of referred to earlier on in the presentation. Like Jimmy had mentioned, I came from upstream oil and gas before this job, so I kind of naturally fit into kind of going and checking out some of these basically production operators that are gathering gas from out in the oil field. So generally speaking, gas gathering pipelines are those that connect gas wells to a compressor station or a gas processing plant where they're going to drop out those liquids and undesirable gases from the gas stream. And then after that gas is processed, they put it into those higher pressure, higher diameter transmission pipelines. There's 4 categories of gas gathering pipelines, type A, B, C, and R. Like Al had mentioned, that type R is kind of that least regulated. They're only doing reporting requirements, incident requirements. I'll get into basically what requirements apply to each type of gathering line. But generally speaking, the big change that happened recently was that there was a rule that came out at the end of 2022 that brought in 2 new categories, the type C and type R, into our purview and jurisdiction here at the state in our office. We had been doing the type A and B since about 2006, back when that rule was first published. And the big thing that they pulled in were pipelines in class 1 areas, which implies basically it's super rural, not a lot of buildings around. It's 10 or fewer buildings in a sliding mile potential impact radius zone. So yeah, the type A and B, like we had kind of seen in the other slides, it was 15 miles here and there. But now we're bringing in basically a lot of these oil and gas wells out in the production fields that we're now regulating.
What's SMYS?
SMYS is SMICE. That's the specified minimum yield strength that has to do with the allowable operating pressure of a pipeline before, basically it's a percentage. 100% SMICE means the pipe actually moves and yields to the pressure, so 20% of that is, where they set a bar, and that's the typical 20% or less is kind of a low risk category compared to 20% or more. Does that make sense a little bit? So yeah, requirements vary based on that operating pressure, diameter, and that class location of how many buildings are nearby. Type A lines, like we had said, are kind of those higher risk ones, closer to buildings that have more buildings in that sliding mile. They're going to follow basically the requirements of a transmission line, except they do not have to run expensive inline assessment tools like a transmission line would. Type B lines, you're going to have all sorts of interesting little requirements that are laid out in CFR 192.9. It's probably a little bit too much in depth to get into all the way here, but they do have to do initial construction and pressure testing, corrosion control for steel and plastic pipeline damage prevention things, and they have to leak survey their line. But then we get into the type C's and R's, which were added relatively recently to our jurisdiction here, and those are, out in the gas field, class 1, rural, and the type C requirements really have a big difference between, their a lot of times diameter and whether or not there's a building intended for human occupancy nearby and in that right of way. So there's quite a few interesting ins and outs that basically are just too detailed to really dive into here, based on what they have to do for different pressures and diameters. But the type R lines, like we were mentioning, those are just reporting the incidents, and these operators of these pipelines have to now register and get an ID through PHMSA and let us know they're out there. So what happened was there was a new rule that was passed that basically brought those type C and type R gathering lines into our jurisdiction. This rule was primarily issued in response to the proximity of some neighborhoods and developments near high pressure, large diameter gathering lines that were, basically they're just encroaching, these neighborhoods were encroaching into the gas fields. And they're, previously completely unregulated, huge high pressure pipelines going through people's backyards, and they thought, maybe we should regulate some of these. Let's make up some criteria to hash out what we should regulate out in these production fields. So they brought in these class 1 rural pipelines into our state program and other federal program jurisdictions. So since this rule, we've added, I think it's up to about 15 or 16 newly regulated operators to our group due to these new categories. Just to give a little bit of an explanation of differentiating, I guess, between type C and type R. Type C lines are often, they have to be over 8-inch. So that's the biggest categorization difference here, is that it's below or under 8-inch, and that puts it into the C or the R bucket. a lot of times you're gonna have these type C lines leaving a compressor station, so they'll have higher pressure gas that they move after they basically collect from all these wells from the type R lines that are basically flowing to the compressor station. So the type R's, you'll have a lot more mileage of those compared to your, one central type C line that moves it on its way to the next processing facility. It's a bigger diameter, so there's only one of them, but basically out in the field, to paint a picture, a lot of times these gathering type R lines, you look at a map and it looks like a bowl of wet spaghetti noodles on a plate, it's just they're everywhere, they're above ground, some are plastic, some are like a combination flex steel and plastic, and they're going through trees sometimes, they're just spread all over the top of the surface a lot of times.
And some of these are close to residential areas?
No, these are all class 1, meaning that they're all rural and there's 10 or fewer buildings in their potential impact radius. Here in Utah, usually there's not one, not a single. But oftentimes, you get a farm or a couple of farmers in an area that are, Roosevelt, Duchesne, Vernal, and South. You'll have a, neighbor or two that pop up. Some of it, will be private land, and some will get a little closer to a place like Mighton than others, but usually it's far enough away from any impact radius for buildings. Because once we get into class 2, 3, 4, where you have 10 or more, those are gathering type A and B, which we've regulated since 2006. So, yeah, these new categories, it's just added a lot of mileage of pipe, and especially that type R category. We're collecting from thousands of wells and bringing it all into one compressor station area.
Okay.
So, yeah, we've added about 6,000 miles of newly regulated gas gathering pipelines. We expect that number to keep going up because regulations haven't quite, reached some of these smaller operators, or some are elusive, some are probably answering our calls on purpose, but we're trying to get all these operators informed and educated on these new rules that came out, and letting them know that they're regulated. And the only way we can really determine that is if we have a conversation and look at maps with them and do a whole inspection with them. So, yeah.
So are you finding lots of leaks in these?
Not a lot of leaks, I wouldn't say. Yeah, number of leaks I don't think is a huge number, but I can only really speak on leaks that are big enough to be reportable that we hear about, because a lot of them right now, and that's kind of what we were addressing with these section 114 methane emissions rules that came out, is now that there's more stringent reporting and data gathering and retention criteria that they have to really, even if it's a leak on a nut, that they fixed by tightening something, they have to capture that in the database now for us, so it's
They're supposed to.
growing pains. Yeah, they're supposed to. There's a lot of, squirming in the industry with all these, Quado, and a lot of regulatory change and requirements coming up on new source performance standards, regular inspections, and it's they're getting inundated right now in that industry, and as a result, we're seeing a lot of selling, acquisitions of bigger companies coming.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions?
My only question would be, apart from the C and R type lines that we just talked about, and the changes of the last couple of years, bringing them more into your regulatory purview, is there anything else that's significant that's changed your processes, or what's required of you by PHMSA in the last 2 or 3 years?
The only thing I can think of immediately is that 20% criteria. They set a new standard in the 2020, I think, area, where they said you must have 20% of your total inspections be construction. And they set a hard number, and they haven't done that before, I don't think.
The other thing I would include is the section 114, which is a mandate that was put into the last reauthorization. It's not a regulation per se, but this is again the environmental pressures that they want to get a handle of. The very question you asked, Commissioner Harvey, that the amount of leaks and emission, methane emission basically.
Yeah.
I think also valves, controlling valves.
Yeah, there've been a couple little pieces here and there. I would say an up and coming one would be cybersecurity. They're really kind of starting a new regulatory push with the, security and cyber aware policies.
They had that big incident on the east.
Right, exactly. That's
Colonial.
a direct result.
Yeah,
Direct result of that one.
So do you audit, does your audit process encompass elements of data security and?
Not a whole lot right now.
I wouldn't, I wouldn't think so.
Not a whole lot.
Whole lot, I mean.
Some is
most
TSA.
Everything is basically under control room management regulation. And, but from what we have learned from our big LDC is that they're doing a good job on their own, even though this is a speculation on my part, based on what I've observed over the years. And not having the regulation and not having the expertise really puts us at a disadvantage to judge these things, because these are cyber, security things.
Now we got Nathan.
Well, yeah, Nathan has a little stronger computer background, and so.
Cybersecurity specialist.
But because of the recent, there was a colonial incident that happened, that was 3-4 years ago. So there is attention and, on this cybersecurity.
Okay. Very good. Thanks very much. I don't have anything else to you, John.
No, ask as we went along, so.
So we'll reach out, somebody will, to set up something for Chair Fenn. Just, wouldn't need to be elaborate like this, but it could even just involve you, Al, but just to sort of spin through maybe the same set of
He'll
slides.
obviously see these already,
Yeah.
because you've sent those to the commission, but I think you suggested just someone meet with him in his office and kind of hit the high points.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Anytime.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming too.
Very
Happy holidays to everybody.
You
Merry
just want to know what they
Christmas,
said
Happy New Year.
about you.
I learned a lot tonight.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Exactly.
All right, very good.